In this episode, we're looking at 5 people who went through the most gruesome experience on their safari trips, from a veterinarian getting attacked by a lioness to a military veteran meeting his end because of a territorial Cape buffalo. But first, we start in Tanzania, where a family forgot that wildlife is never your friend. The morning of March 15, 2017 dawned with perfect safari weather. Across Tanzania's legendary Serengeti National Park, Henry Danforth, a 45-year-old mechanical engineer from Phoenix, had been planning this trip for over 2 years, meticulously rushing the best times to visit in the most exclusive tour operators. His wife Sylvia, 40, to a soft-spoken librarian, had initially been hesitant but eventually warmed to the idea. When Henry promised luxury accommodations and strict safety protocols, their 12-year-old son Mason had been the driving force behind the anti-re expedition, obsessed with big cats. Since he could walk, Mason's bedroom walls were covered with National Geographic posters of lions, leopards, and cheetahs. He had begged his parents for years to take him to see these magnificent predators in their natural habitat. Henry's personality had always leaned toward the unconventional. At work, he was known for finding creative solutions that bypassed standard procedures, a trait that had earned him several promotions, but also occasional reprimands from supervisors who preferred following established protocols. This confidence in his own judgment would prove catastrophic. In the African wilderness, on their 3rd day in Serengeti, Henry made a decision that would haunt the surviving members of the group, forever frustrated by their morning's lack of lion sightings, and eager to give Mason the close encounter he had dreamed of. Henry instructed their guide to drive far from the established tourist routes. When the guide expressed concerns about venturing into areas where other vehicles couldn't provide assistance if needed, Henry dismissed the warnings with the same confidence he brought to engineering problems. The family found themselves in a secluded clearing, surrounded by tall grass, as they unpacked their lunch inside the vehicle. Mason's excitement was palpable. The guide had parked with the engine running, a standard safety precaution. But the peaceful setting gradually lulled everyone into a false sense of security. Mason made the fatal mistake that would trigger the tragedy. Eager to attract wildlife for better photographs, he began to sink pieces of his sandwich into the grass outside the vehicle. Henry Falk used in adjusting his expensive camera equipment didn't notice his son's actions until it was too late. Before Sylvia could stop him, movement in the nearby brush caught everyone's attention. The lioness emerged from the tall grass. African lions are among the most formidable predators on Earth, with females typically weighing between 270 and 400 pounds of pure muscle and bone. Their powerful jaws can exert a bite force of over 650 pounds per square inch, while their retractable claws can grow up to 1 and long, designed for gripping and tearing flesh. Lions can reach speeds of up to 50 miles per hour in short bursts, and their exceptional night vision makes them meekly deadly in darkness or daylight. The guide immediately tried to leave, but Henry insisted that they wait just a moment longer for the perfect shot. The lioness, now only 20 meters from the vehicle, had caught the scent of the scattered food and was investigating with cautious curiosity. Mason, finally seeing a lion up close, begged his father to let him get out for a better photograph. Against every safety protocol he had been taught, and despite the guide's increasingly frantic protests, Henry made the decision that would cost his family their lives. He opened the vehicle door and stepped out, camera in hand, convinced that his presence would create the dramatic wildlife footage he had dreamed of capturing. Mason, seeing his father outside and desperate not to miss this opportunity, scrambled out before Sylvia could stop him. Sylvia, unwilling to abandon them, followed her son out of the vehicle. The lioness's predatory instincts exploded into action the moment she saw the 3 humans standing in the open. To her, these upright figures represent potential threats to her territory and cubs, which were hidden in a nearby brush. Female lions are fiercely protective mothers, and her powerful muscles coiled as she prepared to eliminate the danger with overwhelming force and speed. The attack began with the lioness charging Henry, who was closest to her position. She covered the distance between them in seconds, a massive frame moving with the fluid power that made Lion's apex predator's and screamed as he watched his father disappear beneath the lioness. But history attracted the attention of two more lions from the pride who had been watching from concealment. These additional predators, alerted by the commotion, emerged from the tall grass and immediately focused on the remaining three. Sylvia grabbed Mason and tried to push him back toward the vehicle, but the second lioness was already in motion, covering the ground between them with terrifying speed. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but those minutes contained a lifetime of terror. Henry was the first of all his attempts to fight lioness futile against her overwhelming strength and razor-sharp claws. Mason and Sylvia were caught in open ground between the vehicle and the tree line with no escape route available as the remaining lions closeted in. From multiple directions, their screams echoed across the savannah until pride dragged their victims into the tall grass, where the sounds gradually faded into terrible silence. Lions typically drag their kills to secluded areas where they can feed undisturbed by scavengers or competing predators. The guide managed to drive toward the nearest ranger station while radioing for immediate assistance. Search and rescue teams arrived within 40 minutes. Due to the distance and roughness of the road on the way there, but by then the lions had scattered, and the remains of the Danforth family were found across a wide area. The investigation revealed multiple safety violations, including their family's decision to exit their vehicle in the presence of wild lions, and their failure to follow basic wildlife encounter protocols. While the Serengeti claimed 3 lives in a single afternoon of terror, hundreds of miles away in Zambia's wilderness, another tourist was about to discover that even the most carefully planned safari adventures could turn deadly when darkness fell. The evening of June 8, 2018, brought the kind of perfect African sunset that travel brochures struggled to capture. Paige Myers, a 33-year-old emergency room nurse from Denver, sat beside a cracking campfire at her luxury bush camp in Zambia's South Longwa National Park, watching the sky transform from gold to deep purple. This was her second African safari, and unlike her first trip to Kenya, she had specifically chosen a walking safari experience that promised intimate encounters with wildlife. Paige's colleagues at Denver General Hospital knew her as someone who thrived on adrenaline and challenged. Her 12-year-old nursing career had been built on volunteering for the most demanding shifts: trauma cases, emergency surgeries, and disaster response situations that sent other nurses running for easier assignments. The luxury walking safari operated on a philosophy of minimal impact and maximum authenticity. Guests slept in canvas tents elevated on wooden platforms, with only mosquito netting separating them from the sounds and smells of the African night. On that night, Paige had volunteered for the 2 o'clock a.m. to 4 a.m. watch shift, an optional activity that most guests declined in favor of fun-interrupted sleep. The camp guide had explained that the night watch served multiple purposes: keeping the fire burning to deter scavengers, monitoring weather conditions, and providing an early warning system for any wildlife that might wander too close to the sleeping area. As Paige settled into her watch position, the guide had reminded her about the nocturnal predators that made South Longwa their hunting ground. Leopards were among Africa's most accomplished night hunters, perfectly adapted for stealth and ambush attacks. These solitary cats typically weigh between 130 and 200 pounds, but their compact muscular builds makes them incredibly powerful for their size. Leopards possessed strongest bite force relative to body size of any big cat, with jaws capable of crushing the skulls of their prey. What makes leopards particularly dangerous to humans is their exceptional stealth and climbing ability. They can leap vertically up to 10 feet and horizontally up to 20 ft, making them capable of attacking from trees or elevated positions. Their spotted coats provide perfect camouflage in dappled light, and they can move through dense vegetation without making a sound around to 30 A. M. Page heard what sounded like movement in the camp's food storage. Relocated about 50 meters from the main fire pit, the sounds were subtle rustling, scratching, and the occasional thump that suggested an animal was investigating elevated storage. This was exactly the kind of situation the Night Watch was designed to monitor. But her instructions were clear: observe from the fire pit and alert the guides. If anything seemed threatening, however, Page's natural curiosity and confidence in her ability to handle emergencies led her to make a decision that violated the camp's safety protocols. Instead of waking the guides immediately, she decided to investigate the sounds herself. What Page didn't realize was that a leopard had been observing the camp from the surrounding vegetation for the past hour, drawn by the sense of food and the unusual activity of humans in its territory. As Page approached the storage area, she was completely unaware that the leopard had begun stalking errand. In a heartbeat, the leopard attacked her from behind, slightly to her left, where the predator had positioned itself. Companion Sarah that they would need to step out for just a few minutes. While he guided the empty Makoro canoe through shallow section, Dobbo had checked for hippos and crocodile signs before selecting the spot, and his years of experience had taught him to read the subtle environmental cues that indicated predator presence. However, what none of them realized was that a large Nile crocodile had been resting motionless on the bottom of the channel for the past several hours. The crocodile's presence on this particular channel was not unusual. These predators regularly patrolled the delta's waterways. This particular individual was a mature male, approximately 14 feet in length, and weighing over 800 pounds, with the patience and hunting experience that came from decades of successful predation. As Natali stepped carefully from her Makoro into the shallow water, her foot made contact with the sandy bottom just meters from where the crocodile lay waiting. The vibrations from her footsteps triggered the predator's attack response. Crocodiles possess specialized sensory organs that can detect the slightest vibrations in water, allowing them to locate prey with pinpoint accuracy. Even in murky conditions, the attack happened with the shocking speed that has made crocodiles successful predators for over 200 million years. The massive reptile's jaws clamped down on Natali's right leg just above the ankle. It's 3.0 pounds per square inch by force, crushing bone and severing major blood vessels instantly. The crocodile's death roll began immediately. The spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive tissue damage while dragging the victim underwater. Thabo reacted with quick thinking that came from years of experience in dangerous waters. He immediately began striking the crocodile's head and snout with his wooden pole, aiming for the sensitive areas around the eyes and nostrils that might cause the predator to release its grip. Sarah grabbed her paddle and joined a desperate attempt to free Natalie from the crocodile's jaws. But Nile crocodiles are built for exactly this type of encounter. Once their jaws close on prey, the muscles that control their bite are among the strongest in the animal kingdom, designed to maintain their grip. Even under extreme stress, the crocodile's prehistoric brain was focused on a single objective: dragging its prey to deeper water where it could complete the kill without interference. Despite the combined efforts of Thabo and Sarah, the crocodile succeeded in pulling Natalie beneath the surface of the channel. The entire attack had lasted less than 20 seconds, but those seconds had been enough to transform a peaceful documentary research trip into an unthinkable tragedy. Natali's remains were finally recovered nearly 3 kilometers downstream from the attack site in a quiet backwater, where the crocodile had apparently fed before abandoning the carcass. The discovery brought closure to her family and friends, but also served as a stark reminder of the delta's hidden dangers. While the delta's crocodiles had claimed a life in the water hundreds of miles east in Kenya's most famous game reserve, Heartwarming, Soldier was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous encounters come not from the predators tourists expected to see, but from the massive herbivores. The dawn of October 5th 2016 broke clear and cool across Kenya's legendary Masai Mara National Reserve. Cameron Doyle, a 38-year-old former Army medic from Auckland, was on a walking safari trip that represented the culmination of a month-long African adventure. But it was the opportunity to track big game on foot that had excited him. The most Cameron's military background had shaped every aspect of his approach to adventure travel. During his 12 years as a combat medic with the New Zealand Defence Force, he had served in Afghanistan, East Timor, and the Solomon Islands, developing the kind of situational awareness and quick reflexes that had kept him alive. In some of the world's most dangerous places, his fellow soldiers had known him as someone who could remain calm under extreme pressure, whether treating wounded comrades under fire or navigating hostile terrain in complete darkness. The walking safari in the Masai Mara had appealed to Cameron precisely because it offered the kind of authentic high-stakes experience that vehicle-based tours couldn't provide, like the safety of enclosed safari vehicles. Walking safaris put participants directly into the ecosystem as potential prey, requiring constant vigilance and the ability to read environmental cues that could mean the difference between life and death. His guide was Joseph Kamoni, a 45-year-old Maasai ranger who had been conducting foot patrols in the Mara for over 20 years. Joseph carried a 458 Winchester Magnum rifle and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of animal behavior patterns, seasonal migration routes, and the subtle environmental signs that indicate predator activity. Before their first day of walking, Joseph had educated the group about the Masai Mara's most dangerous inhabitants, including an animal that many tourists underestimated. The Kappa buffalo. These massive herbivores are responsible for more hunter deaths in Africa than lions, leopards, and elephants combined. What made Cape buffalo particularly dangerous was their unpredictable temperament and explosive aggression. Unlike most herbivores that flee from threats, Cape buffalo are known to charge at perceived dangers with devastating force. Their massive heads, protected by thick bone and crowned with deadly horns, could crush a human skull with a single blow. Cape buffalo can reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour despite their enormous size. On their third morning, the group had been tracking a pride of lions when Joseph noticed fresh buffalo tracks crossing their path. The massive hoof print and distinctive dinge indicated that a small group of Cape buffalo had passed through the area within the past few hours, probably moving toward water sources in the early morning. Cameron's military experience had taught him to analyze intelligence from multiple sources, and he found himself fascinated by the detective work involved in tracking wildlife. While Joseph continued leading the group toward their lion observation point, Cameron lingered briefly to examine the buffalo tracks more closely. What Cameron discovered in the grass beside the main trail captured his complete attention. Mixed in with the older buffalo tracks were much fresher signs. His military training told him this intelligence was significant, indicating that buffalo were much closer than Joseph had estimated. Cameron's fatal mistake was deciding to investigate these fresh signs without alerting Joseph to his discovery. His confidence in his own tracking abilities, combined with his natural curiosity about wildlife behavior, led him to step off the established trail and move several meters into the tall grass, where the freshest tracks were most clearly visible. But what Cameron didn't realize was that one of the buffalo had never left the area at all. A massive bull weighing over 1,800 pounds and standing nearly 6 feet at the shoulder had been resting in the shade of a dense thicket just 30 meters away. This was exactly the type of solitary bull that Joseph had warned them about, an elderly animal that had been expelled from his herd due to declining dominance and had become increasingly aggressive and territorial as a result. Joseph, realizing that Cameron had fallen behind the group turned back to look for him. Just as the buffalo bull rose to its feet with surprising speed for such a massive animal, the guide immediately recognized the danger and began shouting warnings, while bringing his rifle to ready position. But the attack was already in motion. The bull's massive head crown with horns that spanned nearly 4 feet from tip to tip was lowered in the classic charging position. Cameron's military reflexes kicked in as he saw the buffalo emerging from the thicket, but his combat training had not prepared him for the speed and power of a charging capable buffalo. The buffalo's massive shoulder caught Cameron in the chest with the force of a freight train, lifting him off the ground and hurling him several meters through the air. Before he crashed into the base of an acacia tree, Joseph's first shot aimed at the buffalo's vital organs struck the massive animal in the shoulder, but failed to bring it down immediately. Cape buffalo are incredibly tough animals, capable of absorbing tremendous damage. Before succumbing to their wounds, their thick, dense muscle mass and robust bone structure make them notoriously difficult to stop in with high-powered rifles. The bull's second charge was even more devastating than the first, its horns finding their target. As Cameron lay helpless against tree, Joseph's second shot, placed more precisely behind the buffalo's shoulder, finally brought the massive animal down. But the damage to Cameron was already irreversible. The former soldier's military medical training allowed him to assess his own injuries with clinical detachment, punctured lungs, massive internal bleeding, and probable damage to major organs. He remained conscious long enough to give Joseph instructions about contacting emergency services. But both men knew the help was too far away to make a difference. Cameron died at the scene within minutes of the attack. His military training and survival skills ultimately no match for the raw power and aggression of one of Africa's most dangerous animals. Joseph, despite his decades of experience and quick response to the emergency, was deeply affected by losing his first client to a wildlife attack. The incident served as a reminder that even the most experienced guides and well-trained tourists remain vulnerable to the unpredictable nature of wild animals defending their territory. Want to watch more kinds of these videos? Click on your screen. Now, thanks for watching. In a dense thicket that provided perfect concealment, the leopard's jaws closed around her neck, with crushing pressure while its claws ran across her torso seeking purchase. To maintain its grip on struggling prey, without a doubt, Paige's life was cut short. The leopard's instincts drove it to drag its prey away from the open area as quickly as possible, and within seconds Paige was being pulled into the dense vegetation surround. The camp leopards are incredibly strong for their size, capable of hauling prey much larger than themselves up into trees or into thick cover, where they can feed undisturbed. Other guests were awakened by the brief sounds of struggle, but by the time they emerged from their tents and called for the guides, the camp had returned to its previous silence. The guides immediately recognized what had occurred. The search that followed involved professional trackers and armed rangers. But leopards are notorious for their ability to cache kills in inaccessible locations. The big cat had dragged Paige's body into a dense river Eni thicket, nearly 300 meters from the camp, where it remained hidden until the following morning. By the time the search team located the site, the leopard had fed extensively and disappeared into the vast wilderness of South Langwa, while Paige Myers had fallen victim to a nocturnal predator's stealth hundreds of miles south in South Africa's most famous game reserve. A young veterinary student was about to discover that sometimes the deadliest mistakes come from overconfidence in one's own expertise. When facing the protective instincts of Africa's apex predators, the afternoon of September 23rd, 2016 brought perfect viewing conditions to South Africa's legendary Kruger National Park. Rick Glass was a 29-year-old veterinary student from Amsterdam. This was his final day in Africa, after spending 6 transformative weeks volunteering at Old Life Rehabilitation Center in Namibia. Eric's journey to Africa had begun 2 years earlier when he decided to specialize in exotic animal medicine. During his veterinary studies, unlike his classmates who focused on domestic animals, Eric was fascinated by wildlife conservation and had spent countless years studying the behavior and physiology of African mammals. The rehabilitation center in Namibia had been everything Eric had hoped for and more. He had assisted in treating everything from injured meerkats to orphan cheetah cubs, gaining hands-on experience that would have been impossible to obtain in European veterinary schools. His supervisor had been impressed by his calm demeanor around wild animals and his intuitive understanding of their stress responses. This success had perhaps given Eric too much confidence in his ability to read wild animal behavior. The fatal encounter began when their vehicle encountered another safari group that had stopped to observe a lioness moving slowly through tall grass about 100 meters away. The guide parked their vehicle at their regulation distance and began explaining lion behavior and hunting strategies. The lioness they were observing appeared to be limping slightly, favoring her right front paw as she moved through these scattered acacia trees. Eric immediately focused his binoculars on the lioness's veterinary training kicking in as he analyzed her gait and posture against guide's explicit instructions to remain seated and quiet. Eric began to stand up in the vehicle, claiming he needed a better view to properly evaluate the animal's condition. When the guide firmly ordered him to sit down, Eric argued that his professional expertise qualified him to make observations that could help the animal. Despite increasingly urgent warnings, Eric opened the vehicle door and stepped out, wanting to get closer to properly assess the lioness's condition. The moment Eric's feet touched the ground, both guards began shouting at him to get back in the vehicle immediately. What Eric didn't understand was that the lioness's unusual behavior had nothing to do with injury or illness. She was amateur with cubs hidden in the nearby brush, and her slow, deliberate movements were the calculated patrol of a protective parent surveying potential threats to her offspring. As Eric walked approximately 30 meters from the vehicle, his movement triggered every protective instinct evolution had programmed into lioness. To her, this upright figure moving directly toward her cub's hiding place represented the most serious threat she had encountered in weeks. Lions are ambushed predators by nature, but when protecting cubs, they'll charge directly at threats with no attempt at stealth or surprise. The lioness's attack began with a roar that could be heard from miles away, a sound designed to paralyze prey with fear. While alerting the pride members to the presence of danger, the charge happened with shocking speed. One moment the lioness was standing motionless in the grass, the next she was covering the distance between herself and Eric in a blur of golden fur and deadly intent. Eric had perhaps 3 seconds to realize his mistake before 400 pounds of enraged lioness slammed into his chest, driving him to the ground with bone-crushing force. The guides immediately started their engines and began honking horns while reaching for rifles, hoping to distract the lioness from her attack. But the lioness was completely focused on eliminating what she perceived as a threat to her cubs, and her attack continued with methodical efficiency. The attack lasted approximately 90 seconds before the combined noise from both vehicles and a warning shot fired over the lioness's head finally caused her to retreat with the brush where her cubs waited. By the time the guards could safely approach Eric's motionless form, it was clear that his extensive veterinary training had not prepared him for this encounter. The investigation that followed revealed that Eric had violated multiple safety protocols and ignored explicit warnings from experienced surgeons. His death led to enhanced safety briefings for tourists with animal-related backgrounds, emphasizing that expertise with domestic or captive animals does not translate into understanding wild predator behavior in natural settings. As Eric Glass's tragedy served as a reminder that in the wild, confidence could be more dangerous than ignorance. Hundreds of miles north in Botswana's pristine waterways, another tourist was about to discover that Africa's aquatic predators could be even more deadly than those that hunted on solid ground. The morning of August 12, 2015 dawned with pristine beauty across Botswana's Okabongo Delta. Natalie Rhodes, a 41-year-old documentary predator from London, adjusted her wide-brimmed hat as she settled into the narrow mackerel canoe that would carry her through the crystal-clear channels of this UNESCO World Heritage Site. Natalie's career had been built on her ability to find compelling stories in remote locations around the world over 15 years. She's produced award-winning documentaries about everything from Arctic wildlife to Amazon rainforest and setting, always pushing for more authentic and immersive experiences. Her colleagues knew her as someone who was never satisfied with standard tourist experiences, always seeking the untold stories and unique perspectives that separated great documentaries from ordinary travel shows. Natalie's traveling companion was Sarah Mitchell, a wildlife photographer from Manchester who had become her closest friend during their university years. Sarah had invited Natalie on the trip after completing a successful assignment photographing elephants in Chobe National Park, and the two women had planned to spend a week exploring the Delta's maze of channels, islands, and lagoons. The Makoro safari operated under the guidance of local polar's expert navigators, who had grown up in the Delta and possessed intimate knowledge of its seasonal changes, wildlife patterns, and hidden dangers. These traditional dugout canoes had been the primary means of transportation in the Delta for over 1,000 years. Natalie's polar was Thabo, a 35-year-old local guide whose family had been navigating the Delta for generations before their journey began. Thabo had explained the Delta's most dangerous inhabitants, knowledge that could mean difference between life and death in these pristine waters. The Nile crocodile was the apex predator of the Delta waterways, a living dinosaur that had remained virtually unchanged. For over 200 million years, these massive reptiles could grow up to 20 feet in length and weigh over 500 pounds, with jaws capable of exerting a bite force of over 3,000 pounds per square in, enough to crush a small car. What makes Nile crocodiles particularly dangerous to humans is their hunting strategy and incredible patience. These predators are ambush hunters capable of remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey to come within striking distance. When prey approaches the water's edge, crocodiles can explode from the surface within or forced to launch their entire body out of the water. On their fourth day, the group had been traveling through a narrow channel when they encountered a section where the water was too shallow for them coros to pass through fully loaded. The standard procedure was for passengers to step out briefly into the shallow water while the polars maneuvered the empty canoes through the obstacle. Thabo had performed this maneuver hundreds of times during his guiding career, and he carefully selected a spot where few water was only ankle deep with a firm, sandy bottom visible through the clear water. He explained to Natalie and her